Good morning, Bears. Let's start solving the mystery of the pyramids. It is Tuesday. We got our basic lessons as usual on groups, always in written form, also in video form. What's our question of the week? Who built a pyramid? Today's lesson basics are to review your pyramid concept slide. On that slide, you will write an hypothesis, guess, claim. Do you think slaves built the pyramids or not? Slaves or both? Now, right now, if you're in Zoom, we're going to go to the breakout rooms, and I want you to just look at that pyramid concept slide, read the research you've got, maybe describe the picture. We're going to go 3 or 4 people in the group, just go around and just really take a look. Learn what you can from the picture. And from there, I want you to write one sentence on that slide stating your claim or guess. Now, you can change it later after we've done the research, but right now, without doing much research, do you think slaves built it? A mix of slaves and people that wanted to help, or no slaves at all? So think about that. Go ahead and write that on that slide after the breakout room. So let's get going to breakout rooms now. If you're not in Zoom and you're watching this video, just pause the video right now. Go look at your pyramid concept slide or do a little research on visual images of the Great Pyramid and just be thinking about how did they build that? Who built it? Do you think it was slaves? All right, let's do that now. Zoom, everybody together. Let's open the slideshow. Make sure you've opened this in science. On the pyramid slide, let's take a look at Samantha, who's done some great work today, by the way. Let's just do a little overview. Now, this is where everybody should be on Tuesday. You should have your basics. She's actually ahead of the game. All I asked for was visuals, and Samantha actually has her research. There's our Great Pyramid. We'll look at that in a second. There's some of our Kingdom of Kush research. So here we have our Kingdom of Kush slide. We'll focus on that later, but notice they have smaller pyramids, different types of structures. Very fascinating. The Nubians came in and they actually conquered Egypt. The Black Pharaohs ruled, so that's a great little history slide. The Nubians, look at that. We can learn a lot from these pictures. They had a lot of good weaponry. If you look at this, you can learn what type of weapons. What do you think they were good at? What kind of technology did they have? So these are just our overview of the region. Remember, these are in Upper Egypt, which is the lower part of the map. Sounds weird, right? Why the lower part of the map is called Upper Egypt? Because it had a higher elevation. So this is deeper into Africa. They actually conquered the lower Egypt regions at times, and then it went back and forth. Here we have King Tut. Fantastic. You will notice I put King Tut twice. That was a mistake in our concept slides. Very fascinating. Do your research on him. Social structure, very fun. Classic pyramid shape. They do that because it is a pyramid. It means there's less people at the top ruling a lot of people at the bottom. You can guess who's at the bottom. Slaves. But how many slaves did they have? Did they help build the pyramids? We already did King Tut. Meroe of Kush. Meroe was an ancient city on the east bank of the Nile, about 6 kilometers northeast of the Kabushian station near Shede, Sudan, approximately 200 kilometers northeast of Khartoum. Near the site is a group of villages called Bagret. So this was actually a capital city of Kush. Once again, we can see and learn from this primary source. We're going to talk a lot about primary sources today. Let's take a look at the Black Pharaohs. Very cool. Where did the Black Pharaohs come from? History has, however, shown us that there was a time ancient Egypt was ruled by the Black Pharaohs. These pharaohs came from the renowned Kingdom of Kush, which is one of the ancient civilizations that were advanced in terms of organization, culture, and politics. Like we've talked about when we study the Native Americans, or even when you go to 7th and 8th grade history, and we have the terrible, terrible thing of Americans and slaves, and we see that it's not always about race. Sometimes it's more who has the power. Okay, so now we come down here. We have King Tut, which once again, there was 2 of those. You only need to do 1, but that's bonus. And then Pharaoh Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut was the 5th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt. She was the 2nd historically confirmed female pharaoh, the first being Sobeknefer. Hatshepsut came to the throne in Egypt about 1478 BC. All right, so let's dive into our investigation. We've got our overview of Egypt. We have different pharaohs. We have our pyramid. You should have already written your prediction. Who built the pyramid? Now let's take a look. We're going to look at one set of sources today. And remember, sourcing is very important to know who wrote and who produced it and when they did it to see if it's a quality source. So the slides we're going to work on today is evidence slide number 1, evidence slide number 2. Notice document A, so this is one document. A document we refer to when a piece of history, whether it's a primary source or a secondary source, and when it was done. Go ahead and read this together. Now, when you do some close reading, you want to focus on details, but I will read this aloud for us today. Before you even read a text, though, you want to see who wrote it. So in this case, this is the histories written by the Greek historian Herodotus. Now, they put that here in 440 BCE. Now, 440, remember, is before Christ or before Common Era. Now, remember, we're talking about things that happened 2,000 to 3,000 years BC, possibly even 5,000 years BC. The United States of America is over 200 years old. People have been in the Americas for more like 3 or 4 as far as, Europeans and settling. A lot longer than that, but officially America is only 200 years old. And we are talking about a historian writing things about something that happened 1,000 years before. So this is not at the time, so this would be a secondary source. Let's see what he says. Herodotus spent much of his life traveling to collect information for his book. He based his history book on the stories that the people in the places he visited reported to him. So he was a historian. Greece was going. We're going to learn about Greece next semester. But this is about 500. I like to round up about 500 BC. And he's traveling around trying to learn about these pyramids and learn about history and figure things out. He's a historian just like we are. Let's see what he said. The Egyptians told me that Cheops became king over the Egyptians and brought about every kind of evil. He closed all the temples and forced all the Egyptians to work for him. Some were forced to mine stones, and he ordered others to move the stones after they had been carried over the river in boats. So we can learn things about how the stones got there. They worked in groups of 100,000 men at a time, and each group worked for 3 months continually. This was the making of the Great Pyramid, which we're studying, which itself took 20 years. So we have some good information there. So we're going to come back and check on this. And when we highlight things, what I want you to do is use your highlighter function. So if we come up here, you can see, where is mine? View, hold on a second, I got to figure this one out. What you to do is make sure you click on the text, and that'll open this thing up. And see, we have highlighter, you have underlining. Let's use the highlighter tool. You can pick whatever color you want. And you're going to highlight key elements that you can use in your essay later. Because we're going to write a CER. So each day today we're going to do some evidence. Tomorrow we're going to do some evidence. Thursday, Friday will be our CER epic. And you're going to take evidence from these documents. So we have some information there. We don't know what's relevant yet. Let's go take a look at our next slide. Evidence number 2. Document B. Now this is from a textbook. Now textbooks get updated continuously, including the one that we're not using, but you do have access to online if you'd ever like to go check it out. But I like to go with current articles for our teaching because that's the most current information. You usually want something as a secondary source closest to the day we are because it's usually going to be more relevant. Maybe they had a new finding. But let's read this one. This is an excerpt from a high school history textbook, Our World Through the Ages, published in 1959. So keep in mind, that's a long time ago, almost 60 years ago? So let's see what that textbook said. At Giza stands the Great Pyramid. It has stood there for 5,000 years. It covers 13 acres and stands nearly 500 feet high. It contains over 2 million blocks, most of which weigh about 2 tons. 100,000 lash-driven men poured out their sweat and blood for 20 years to complete this resting place, which King Khufu considered fit for his royal remains. Now remember, this is coming from a textbook, secondary source. Now you do have a primary source, this slide we looked at, because if you have a photo, you're looking at an actual photo. So this, even though it's 50 years ago, maybe it's accurate about the time. Maybe it's accurate about the 2 million blocks. We can count those. People probably are counting those today, so that might be accurate. So maybe some of it's right, maybe some of it's wrong. And right now, we want to analyze between those two evidence these 3 questions. According to both the textbook, this one, Herodotus, this part. Who built the Great Pyramid? So let's answer that question now. And I want you to highlight the parts of the text that are giving you that information. So for example, how long did it take? Let's do that one together. And I want you to do the same for this. But here it is, 20 years. Poured their sweat and blood for 20 years to complete this restaurant. So I'm going to highlight 20 years because that's evidence for me to support my claim that I'm going to say here, 20 years. I'm doing that one for you because it's easy and I want you to understand what to do. How many people worked on the Great Pyramid? You're going to go up here and you're going to go up here. Now remember, you're comparing two sources. Do they say the same thing or do they say something different? I didn't look yet. Does this one say 20 years? What about the people? Now the more challenging activity today, which we're all going to work on right now, is who built the Great Pyramid? Remember our question. Slaves? Slaves and regular people? Or a combination? You made a claim earlier. Do not change that claim yet because we're not done researching. From these two pieces of evidence, what are these pieces of evidence telling us? Who do they say built the pyramids? All right, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. When we come back, I want to see highlighted the portions, the evidence, the cited research that is going to support what you are saying they say. Remember, this is not what you say. This is what is Herodotus saying, and what is the textbook saying. So let's do that now. Answer those questions. You have 10 minutes. Okay, let's share out. Anybody want to volunteer to look at some slides? I'm not going to write anymore here. Samantha would love it if I did because then I would give her some answers. I'm just going to speak it. So, according to both textbook and Herodotus, who built the Great Pyramids? If we look up here, what does he say here? Every kind of evil forced all the Egyptians to work for him. That sounds kind of like slaves. Forced to mine stones. Ordered others to move stones. 100,000 men at a time. 3 months continually. What does this one say? Covers 13 acres. It contains over 2 million blocks, most of which weighed about 2 tons. Doesn't matter for our question. 100,000 lash-driven men. So there's another 100,000. That answers how many. Both sources said 100,000 men, so we learned from that. Poured out their sweat and blood for 20 years. And what's the key here for whether they were slaves or free? Lash-driven men. A lash is like a whip. You're not being lash-driven if you're doing it for free and because you want to help because you believe in building the temple. This sounds like slaves. So we're going to highlight that evidence for these 3 questions. You're going to write your answers here, and you are done for today. Now, if you have not, like Samantha, if your slideshow does not look like this, which is beautiful, with all your evidence and your pictures so we can learn our background and context and social structure and things like that, then you need to get that done by tomorrow. So by tomorrow, everybody's slideshow needs to look like Samantha's. You need to have this slide complete. Nothing to do there but highlight the important parts. And this slide complete, highlight the important parts, answer your 3 questions. All right, let's do this. Tomorrow we dive into different sources and see what they say about the mystery of the pyramids. All right, let's get to work. Finish up your slideshows. We'll see you tomorrow.